Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today's webinar is about the esports evolution, where we are, and what's next. My name is Patrick Buono. I'm a marketing manager at BIA Advisory Services, and I'll be running the webinar for you guys today. So we're going to give everyone else a few more minutes to get on and get settled. So while they're doing that, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items really quickly. I'd like to start by reminding everybody that we are recording today's webinar and that all registered attendees will be receiving an email from us with links to the on-demand version as well as a PDF of the slide deck. So keep a lookout for that sometime tomorrow morning usually. If at any time during today's webinar you experience any technical difficulties, please just email us at webinars@bia.com. We have some staff that is standing by that can assist you. And then finally, we'd just like to encourage everyone to ask questions throughout today's webinar. So if at any time a question pops in your mind, please just type it into the questions box on your GoToWebinar panel. And we'll try to get your question either at the end of today's webinar. If we don't have time, we'll follow up with you separately afterwards. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get things started here. And I'll turn things over to one of the moderators for today's session, the Managing Director of BIA Advisory Services, Rick Ducey. Rick?
Patrick, thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rick, as Patrick mentioned, I'm Managing Director of BIA, and I'll be co-moderating this session today on esports with Mitch Oscar, who you'll meet in just a moment. And this is an event we've been partnering with the Secret Society that Mitch will describe in a little bit that focuses on automated, programmatic, advanced TV kinds of topics. And so the presenters today, it's a collaborative presentation between the Secret Society and BIA for this session on esports, and call out to Chris Pizzurro at Esports Ad Bureau who help us organize all these different things. So today, our agenda is we're going to look at the esports evolution, and we at BIA focus on local media markets. So we're going to take it to that lens, but we'll also take it from a bigger picture too, because so much is happening in this. So we'll start off with a couple of comments that I'll share, and then move on to Mitch Oscar, who organizes the Secret Society, and get a couple of more perspective kinds of insights for what's happening generally in advanced TV, and then with the fragmentation and audience shift across different platforms and different types of content, why we're seeing so much excitement happening in the esports segment of everything that's happening in the media business these days. And the next slide, I thought I would just call out a few of the top line trends that we're seeing from our perspective, particularly again for local media. So for esports, it's a fast-growing audience segment. Just in the past couple of years, it's really sprung up. This tends to be a younger and male audience, so those are harder to reach demos. And esports gives a platform to reach these demos across screens. So as the big screen linear TV set connected to different forms of content distribution networks, but getting to those cross-screen audiences, so it's hard to reach demos. And then from a broadcast perspective, it's advertising revenue, but also different kinds of incremental revenue that we'll get into a little bit. And the thing, again, for the local media is that for esports, and esports is basically like the NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, except for instead of actual physical games, they're e-games, but these happen in venues just like a real sports contest would. So there are leagues that are expanding across these different kinds of franchises, and these leagues, as with their physical analog, have cities, have physical locations. So there are location-based leagues expanding in this marketplace. So next few slides, I thought I'd just point to a couple of things that are being highlighted in the trade press and even the general press. So this is something esports calls for a new playbook for broadcasters, something that was in the Wall Street Journal recently. Highlights some of the data from a Deloitte global study. The North American esports market set to grow 35% this year alone. And in that article, I've got the URL down at the bottom. You can check that out at the Wall Street Journal. But this is a pretty big growth segment. So people in the media business, whether they're on the buy side or sell side, trying to find those audiences. A good chunk of audiences are going to this platform, and it's growing, and there's some different kinds of opportunities. Next slide, please. So that, just to put a couple of numbers on it, I'll share some data from eMarketer, and then a piece that appeared in Ad Exchanger recently. So the audience growth, just looking at 2008, go into 2022, forecasting that out, you can see that kind of year-over-year audience growth in terms of millions of audience members from 167 last year going up to 276 for the whole, kind of esports audience. The prize pool, there's significant amounts of money in the prize pool, and the total monetization, according to the Goldman Sachs report released a few months ago, you can see that that's growing. The bottom line in that chart over on the left, growing pretty nicely. The digital ad revenue, the eMarketer chart below that, again, just shows the trend line of more in terms of ad revenue. So those in the media business in search of ad revenue, this is a very interesting place to look. And those on the buy side trying to find audiences and how to connect with them across different kinds of content media platforms, this is a good place to find them also. And then we're starting to see, we certainly see some opportunities for local media, both buy side and sell side in esports. And we're starting to see these kinds of articles like appeared in Ad Exchanger. As esports viewership soars, TV leaders must get off the sidelines.
Rick?
It's time to kind of engage. Fast-moving target. Activision bringing esports franchises to a city near you. I mean, look for that as you start to consider your business opportunities going forward. So with that brief overview of some of the high-level points that we're seeing that are of interest to local media participants when it comes to esports, and just
Rick, are we still on?
sharing a few kind of things in the general press and trade press.
We're losing sound a little bit, Rick.
Yeah, we're having some troubles with your microphone, Rick.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Let me turn it over to Mitch, and I'll sit. Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. It seems I can be heard. Hi, so I'm Mitch Oscar, and I run and organize the Secret Society. And we thought that since we're bringing esports into the equation to our audiences, we would invite anyone who's listening to this webinar to join if they wish. There's no fees. We get together twice a year. And if you're interested, then please contact Rick. And I think the BIA, Kelsey, Rick's address is throughout this presentation, and you can certainly be in contact with us. Next. So the Secret Society, the reason we created it is we wanted a dialogue about issues, models, and data affecting the evolution of advanced television. And the next slide says we even added esports because everyone was so interested. Next slide. So these are the companies that are actively involved with the Secret Society. So you can see that is a fair representation of the media companies, agencies, data companies, content providers, distributors, who are just curious. And this is our organization, we think, is one of the last democratic institutions left in the United States. Next. We always thank anybody who's participating. So in the last one, which we did on April 1st, you can see the different companies that were speaking and the participants. Next. So we always try to use cartoons to make the point of what we want to understand. Okay, all right. And so here is smoke and fire. So most people talk about smoke, but we want people talking about the fire, what really makes sense about any of the value propositions we bring to our audience. Next. The status, well, it's taking us longer than we thought to go programmatic. Next. We like to deal in reality, so this is what lemmings might think. Next. And we want to clarify. So in this cartoon, as you see, ladies and gentlemen of the media community, let me present the alternative facts of the value proposition. We'd really like to get to the core of them, as you will see the panelists, the presenters talk about today. Next. Transparency is a big issue in the media community particularly, so let's never forget that the media community's desire for transparency has to be balanced by our need for concealment. And jargon. Everybody loves jargon, particularly in the media community. I know when I study the different platforms, there's over 100 self-reported data sources that companies are using. So this is a wonderful opportunity where it says enhanced branding metrics drive robust solutions for scalable monetization of jargon. Next. So that's what the Secret Society is about. So you've heard what Rick talked about. If you're interested in becoming a member, let us know, contact Rick. So now we're going to start with the speakers and the presenters, and Kazra, you're up first.
Thanks, Mitch. So my name is Kazra Jafridi, and I oversee strategy and analytics for Activision Blizzard Esports. And I'm here to talk to you guys a little bit about esports and share some insights that we're seeing. And the focus of today's presentation, you'll see in the next slide, is I wanted to go past the general esports 101 because there's a lot of literature out there already and a lot of presentations that have been given on what esports is. And I will focus on three things that most people, I would say, don't know about esports, and hopefully everyone on this call walks away smarter from. And the first thing is I want to show how many people watch esports, but I want to show real apples-to-apples numbers that are actually comparable. I want to look at the different revenue models within esports because there's a lot of different companies all probably trying to get sponsorships and investments. And I think it's important to understand how they actually operate. And then lastly, I want to kind of go over the esports ecosystem from a measurement perspective and show some of the problems there that I think apply to the broader esports ecosystem. So starting with how many people watch esports, the metric I want to look at is US average minute audience, which is exactly how linear TV is measured. And this is Overwatch League, and I'm showing Overwatch League here because it's one of our leagues and it's the one we have data for. But I assume the trends we see here is true of most esports. But if you look here, we can see like total apples to apples, US to US average minute audience of Overwatch League and traditional sports. But this view doesn't look good. Overwatch League is way smaller than anything else. So why would I show this? Well, if we actually look at the ages of here in the next slide, and we actually look at the 18 to 34, the 18 to 49, and the 49 and older audience, you can see that a large portion of traditional sport viewership is older than 49. And in the next slide, if you actually take away that audience that's older than 49 and older than 34 and focus on just the 18 to 34 audience, which is the most valuable audience, what we can see is not only do we lose a large portion of traditional sports audience, but at that point, Overwatch League actually becomes very competitive with traditional sports in the US. This isn't looking at some unique numbers or some total reach and trying to compare some numbers that don't match. This is looking at completely apples to apples comparison. And in the next slide, I think what's actually really important is looking at the trend. And if we start by looking at the 2018 numbers and we actually follow traditional sports 18 to 34 over the next 2 years, we see how they did in 2017 and how they did in 2018. What we can quickly realize is that traditional sport 18 to 34 viewership is declining. And if we look, for example, how Overwatch did in its first season and how it's doing in 2019 and where we see it going the next 4 years, we can see that esports doesn't just have the potential to become relevant, it has the potential to become much larger than traditional sports in the next 3-4 years, not in the next 20 years. Now, I know this is looking at the 18 to 34 audience and not the whole audience, but I think this is the audience that really paints the picture of what's possible in the future. Because as this audience grows older, they're not going to naturally switch to traditional sports. They're going to watch what they grew up watching. And that's why I think esports is blowing up so much right now. That's why it's so relevant. But the landscape is pretty confusing. There's a lot of companies here that do a lot of different things. And I want to focus on 3 companies within this. And the next slide, you'll actually see those 3 companies. I want to focus on independent league operators. These are companies that just run esports leagues. ESL is actually a good example of that. Then I want to look at the publisher league operators. These are companies that make the games and run the league, like our company. And I want to look at teams, the esports teams out there. And these are the guys that are probably most active in trying to gain investments right now. So if we start with the independent league operator, I thought the best way to look at how these guys operate is actually look at the cash flow and where the money's coming from. And you can see that they're making money from brand sponsorships, they're making money from distribution, and they're making money from consumers. But because they don't own the game, they do have to pay licensing rights to the game publisher. And then they also have to pay the teams to compete. I think one of the biggest negatives of a league operator is that they don't own the game and they don't own the IP rights. And at the end of the day, they're reliant on the publisher. However, a really big positive for a league operator is they can always run the most popular game. So if a game is very popular and it dies, they don't have to go down with the game. They can just switch to another game. But I think the revenue opportunity overall is a little bit smaller as well because of that. Now, if we look at the publisher model, and this is like us and Riot, because we own the IP rights, there's a lot more potential in investments. And as well, something we've done is franchise our league and actually sell franchise spots to team owners at pretty high buy-in prices. And there is some rev share that goes back to the teams as well from that. Now, similar to the operator model, because we own the game, it's our responsibility to keep the game relevant, because we can't just switch. Overwatch League can't just become another game in next year or in the next 2 years. So it's our responsibility to make sure the game stays relevant and stays popular. And then if you look at the third one, which I think is the most important one, which is a team model, just because I think teams are the most vocal ones out there raising money. What we know is most teams are in a franchise league of some sort and they're paying a lot to be there. And they're getting some rev share back, but definitely not already making their investments back. They have to pay their players, and any money they usually win from tournaments, like the open leagues like ESL, usually goes straight to the players. So their main revenue sources are selling products to consumers and getting sponsorships from brands. And what has changed recently is a lot of people have wanted to invest in esports, but out of those three buckets we've just looked at, teams is probably the only place most investors and VCs can really invest in. Publishers aren't really taking investments, and league operators don't need it either. And because of that, I think the value of teams has gone up considerably. And it's hard to really know what the value for teams is. Personally, I think they may be overvalued right now because of the market conditions that have led to this. But I think it's really important to know how each of those buckets operates as you kind of evaluate esports. Now, the last thing I want to look at is the esports ecosystem. In the next slide, we'll see that I want to start by looking at actually traditional sports. Oh.
No, Patrick?
It's
that's fine, actually.
That's the last slide we had on you. I'm sorry. My apologies. We must have lost it.
No, it's totally fine. I think we've already gone through the two most important ones. I can talk verbally to the last point. I think in traditional sports, what we take for granted is this bucket of companies that we call third-party measurement, who are tracking audiences separate to any property out there. So, for example, Nielsen is a great example for US. They're tracking how many people watch NFL, but they're not getting their numbers from NFL. They're not getting their numbers from CBS. They are independently tracking that. And that's very valuable in validating the number of people watching. Esports doesn't have that. The numbers come from the distributors. So we get the numbers from Twitch. And then us as the league have to share those numbers with brands. Now, we do our best to make sure all the numbers are right. But at the end of the day, without third-party measurement, there's less trust in the ecosystem. And I think it stops the esports ecosystem from really maturing to its potential. Now, that's something that will probably change in the next year and something I would say for everyone to look out for. But I think that is one of the biggest problems that esports currently has.
Is that your closing, Kasra?
Yep.
All right. Eli, you're up next. And everyone, please understand that Paul, who had presented at the Secret Society, for personal reasons, couldn't do this last minute. And he asked Eli, who he has told us is his right-hand man. Eli, you're up.
Thanks a lot. Do you want to go to the next slide? Perfect. So as you mentioned, my name is Eli McCarroll. I'm the Director of Brand Partnerships at ESL. I've been at ESL for about a year. Prior to ESL, I was at the TAC-12 Conference and Networks, where I oversaw integrated marketing and sales. I was there for about 3 years. Prior to that, I was at Turner Sports, where I worked on the ad sales and sponsorship team. I was there for about 7 years, working on virtually every Turner property: March Madness, Bleacher, TNT, basketball, Major League Baseball, CBS, and the list goes on. Prior to that, I was at Nike for about a year in a global basketball marketing group. So kind of my, I guess, role within ESL is to bring a real unique lens from a traditional sports. I mean, I have a very kind of traditional sports-rich background. And, you know, kind of one of the trends you're seeing in esports is that intersection of traditional sports and esports. So hiring people from the outside world, you know, adds value from a traditional sports background. So before we get started, I wanted to just, for those in the room that aren't as familiar with esports, Kaja, I'm going to kind of take one step back and share this video that we created to help everyone kind of understand the space that we play in. Hopefully the video works. If it doesn't, we can move right along and we can share the video afterwards.
Patrick, is there sound?
Esports is an all-encompassing term for a variety of different types of competitive games, like Counter-Strike Global Offensive, League of Legends, StarCraft, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and many, many more. You haven't heard of esports? That's probably because the majority of its fan base is under 35 years of age. It's the fastest growing sport in the world that most adults have never heard of. The next generation of athlete has come about virtually overnight. And with the rise of mobile gaming, people can now play anywhere, anytime on their phone. In fact, the next pro gamer could be standing right next to you, playing online at the grocery store. Esports athletes practice many hours a day, like traditional athletes, and are known to have hand-eye reflexes that are some of the fastest on Earth. Professional teams exist all over the globe. Each team fields players in different games. For example, the Philadelphia 76ers are the owners of the professional team Dignitas, which fields teams in Clash Royale, Rocket League, Heroes of the Storm, Counter-Strike, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and Super Smash. Regardless of your opinion on esports, you can't ignore that it's serious business. Just look at the facts. Esports has more fans watching than some major professional sports leagues. Huge tournaments are held all over the world with audiences of 100,000 or more in attendance. With millions more watching online with live streaming platforms such as Twitch. And the prize money that players get for winning tournaments is turning video game playing teenagers into multi-millionaires. Esports is everywhere. Esports is the future. How are you going to be a part of it?
I think there's a little lag with the audio and the video, so I'll just wait a few seconds for it to wrap up. Just for the next slide. Cool. Okay, so a quick background on ESL. I'm sure some of you have heard of us. Many of you know a lot about us, but just to level set. So we've been around for about 19 years. We were founded in the year 2000. We were founded in Cologne, Germany. That's where our headquarters is still today. Globally, we've got just over 500 employees, and then we have studios and or offices in 13 different countries. You know, one of the visions of the company here in North America is to really grow out our esports footprint here in the U.S. Is 4x in size. We were 3 people a year ago, and now we're about 13. So, you know, here in the North America, ESL has made a concerted effort to really grow out and develop products and events and partnerships here in the U.S. You know, we also work very closely with our sister company, DreamHack, from a brand partnership standpoint. DreamHack and ESL are both owned by the same parent company, MTG. So we work really closely with. And then here in the U.S., I sit in New York, which is primarily sales strategy and service. And then we've got studios and offices in Burbank, where we have about 40 people. And that's, primarily publisher relations, product, marketing, HR, and then some of the more kind of office-focused positions. So to give you kind of an insight into where ESL sits. As Kaja mentioned, we are an independent league operator. So we work with publishers to secure game licenses, and then we take those licenses and we create global leagues and tournaments featuring some of the top esports teams in the world. And then traditional to like a traditional sports property, we then drive revenue through brand partnerships, sponsorships, media rights, and then our live events, which obviously have the streams like ticket sales and merch and things like that. Next slide. And so this is my equivalent of the logo slide. And I think it's pretty representative of where ESL sits. As an independent league operator, we kind of sit right in the middle. So we're working with multiple stakeholders in the esports space, from publishers to teams to distribution platforms. But at the same time, I think this is a pretty good visual to represent, the competition in the space, right? So many of these companies are at the same time working to secure partnership investments, sponsorship investments, looking to secure media rights, game licenses, the list goes on. So a company like Twitch is obviously one of our biggest distribution partners, but also they're out selling sponsorships and partnerships and fighting for the same investments that ESL is. Next slide. Taking a step back, I think it's an important slide to share as this room or this group educates themselves on esports to understand kind of the game titles that are driving the most play viewership and prize payouts. ESL, between ESL and DreamHack, we've organized events for virtually all of these game titles in the past. More recently, Counter-Strike and Dota has been our core business from a live event standpoint. But we've worked with different publishers in different games to run leagues and tournaments for them, as well as live events in arenas globally. Next slide. So this is my last slide, but I wanted to kind of leave you with ESL's philosophy and mission as an independent league operator and kind of where we sit in the ecosystem. We truly believe that to create sustaining esports, there needs to be an ecosystem for player development, player growth. There needs to be, low barriers of entry for people that are really looking to get serious about developing their esports career. So we've created products and platforms here in the U.S., but also globally, to not only celebrate kind of the highest level, and on this slide, the Masters, the world's best, kind of our Super Bowl events. But we need to provide an opportunity for anyone to start their esports career. So we've got, our ESL Mobile Open, which we just launched about a month ago, where we're featuring 3 different mobile titles, and literally anyone on this call can start after this and start their esports career. They sign up and start competing right away. And we've created these ecosystems where players can ladder up, develop, and there have been times where pro teams will actually come down to our leagues and our tournaments on more of the challenger level and find professional talent. So I think that's a big win for us as a company, as we truly try to create a platform where everybody can be somebody, which is our company mantra, but also kind of what we believe and what our mission statement is. So that's it. If you have any questions, you can hit me up on LinkedIn, via email. I don't know if Mitch is going to share our information afterwards, but always happy to talk. Thanks.
Thank you, Eli. Now we'll go to the next slide. So Colin couldn't make it today. Some personal issues came up, and that's why he has a black and white photograph as opposed to the others have color. We've talked about the ecosystem. So is it leagues? Is it teams? Is it combination? But for many of the people on this call and also at the Secret Society, we wondered, well, what did it all mean? What is the viewing experience? We might not get it. We understand traditional sports. We passively sit and we watch. So Zach Oscar from MRI Simmons is going to take the viewing experience, take us through it. So why don't we go to Zach?
Great. Thanks very much. All right, let's jump into my presentation then. All right, great. So basically, I titled this Viewership and Viewingship, A Tale of Two Gamers, because we're really looking at, as Mitch was just saying, the viewing experience of esports, right? Watching esports is different from watching traditional sports, and I wanted to, give you guys some insight into what that experience looks like. So if you go to the next slide, great, thank you. The traditional experience, right? We're used to watching TV. We're used to watching TV with friends. We're used to potentially being in a big arena watching a live event. And no matter what, you don't have interaction with the content. You're a part of a group that's passively watching something taking place, right? And in esports, it's different. So if you go to the next slide, many of you have probably, if you know anything about esports, I imagine you've heard of this guy named Ninja, right? Ninja is a Twitch streamer, and when we talk about esports, you know, we're not only highlighting the competitive play that Eli and Kosra are talking about, but we're also talking about a whole ecosystem around it that lends itself to the success of gaming as a competitive sport. Right, and Ninja is part of this because he streams basically all day, every day, and as you know, many people were shocked to hear he makes about $500,000 a month playing Fortnite, which is a battle royale game that I'm going to show you some screenshots of in a second. But he's garnered this incredible following, and part of what I know a lot of people are wondering is why. Why do people care about watching this guy play games? So I'm hopefully going to illustrate that to you in a moment. So if you go to the next slide, please. What you see right now is a screenshot of what it looks like when you open up Ninja's channel page on Twitch. Okay, if you hit next, you'll see here that on the left-hand side, I'm just going to break it down for you. Very simple. On the left-hand side, you've got a web camera that's on Ninja. Okay, he keeps that on him at all times, and you can see him while he's playing, and it gives people sort of the audience a look at, okay, here's the guy behind the screen, and he will look at his monitor, which he's looking at right now. He's not looking directly at the camera, but sometimes he'll look at the camera and address his followers, right? If you hit next, please. This is a game called Fortnite. Many of you have heard of it. It's a battle royale where about 100 individual players who are all playing on separate consoles will drop into a map. It's like the Hunger Games kind of philosophy. You drop in, you've got nothing, you scramble to find things and be the last one standing. What you're seeing the red arrows pointing to on the screen is Ninja's avatar. So he's made his have little devil wings and whatnot, but that's him. That's who he runs around as in-game. Next, please. So on the top here and the bottom, you can see this was a screen grab that I took of a screenshot of his channel. And at the moment that I took this screenshot, if you look at the bottom for his viewership numbers, he's got 34,000 people watching him in this moment that I took the screenshot live. And his profile, his channel, has 431 million views throughout its entire, lifespan. And at the top of the page, you'll see that he has 13.7 million followers, which means that whenever Ninja logs on and goes live, 13.7 million people are notified that he's doing so. So again, you've got these people with this massive influence, this big following. They've got an amazing live presence, and Ninja is an exemplar of that. Next, please. On the right-hand side, right, so not only is it a little different than traditional sports because you're seeing the player, you're seeing what he's playing, but the biggest difference right here is that there's an interactive chat that's embedded in the viewing system when someone's watching gaming and esports, right? I'm going to highlight some things in this chat. If you'll go to the next slide, you'll see, click one more time, please. You'll see that at the top here, this is from the same screen grab I just did, someone commented, yo, at Ninja, so he tagged Ninja. He said, me and my friends are watching you from school. And later down in the thread, someone said, why? School's important. And someone else said, yeah, pay attention in class, bud. So there's a whole kind of ecosystem of people watching, and they're sending all sorts of things to Ninja while he's playing. And he doesn't necessarily address all of them, but there's a community interacting with each other and with the personality while he's playing. Go to the next slide. Great. And on the right-hand side, right, this isn't without sponsorship opportunity, right? So the big dollars here are from sponsorships and other sorts of ways that ad content makes it into gaming. And on the right-hand side here, he's got a sponsorship spot on his screen while you're watching him that's a computer manufacturing company that will make you a computer with Ninja's logo on it. So if you're a huge fan, you can use a code, you get a little decal of Ninja's logo on it, and other potential perks, right? Next slide. Further down on his page, you can see that he has sponsorships from a number of different groups, right? So in the bottom, you see the building the console piece. But then on the top right, I found this particularly funny. You've got Revelation Real Estate. So real estate has made its way into Ninja sponsorships. You've got a code for gaming chairs. Those are becoming very important. And then finally, Uber Eats, right? Eats Ninja. I actually used that code when I saw this because I thought, hey, whatever, I saw it, right? So I got my free delivery. And if you go to the next slide, I thought, look at all, there's all this kind of stuff going on when you're looking at a profile. This is the conglomerate of all the arrows I used here. You've got the chat, you've got the sponsorships, you've got Ninja, you've got his avatar, you've got his follower stuff. And I thought it'd be great if I could somehow live capture Ninja for the presentation. But, Ninja's hard to reach, and he's a celebrity now, and he is a busy guy. So I reached out, if you go to the next slide, to my friend Harrison. Okay, my friend Harrison recently committed himself to becoming a professional streamer, right? And he dropped out, or not dropped out, he quit his job, and he's now streaming full time and trying to make a name for himself. And so in the bottom corner here, you see Harrison. He's got a camera on him like Ninja. He's got a camera pointed at him. He's got his game he's playing called BioShock. And one of the things I just want to emphasize is that video games, all esports are video games, but not all esports or not all games are esports, right? So you need to be careful that, for example, BioShock, which I'm showing you right now, does not have a competitive scene. But streamers can play whatever they want and people will watch them, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not still important. And so my friend Harrison here is playing a game called BioShock. It's a first-person kind of horror game. And so what I'm going to do, if you hit next, please, you'll see he has an interactive chat here as well. And if you go to the next slide, this is actually going to be a quick video, and I know that the video is a little slow because we're broadcasting it, but listen to what he says and recognize that as he's playing, he's actually addressing the chat that is on the top right that I've put the big arrow to. So go ahead and play this.
So you're gonna have Blizzard execs rotting in chat on stream, so add Blizzard. Oh my god. It's a Blizzard marketing person. It's a Blizzard marketing person. So hi to the conference, by the way. Like, hello, guys. Say hi. Actually, say hi to the conference. I'll use this part, and we'll you can get whatever you want to say. If you want to say hi, Mitch. Mitch is the person who's employing me in this. It's my friend's dad. Mom, yeah, you can if you want.
Great. So, all right, that's the end of that clip. So basically what you heard him say, and even though the video is laggy, what you heard him say was you had people in the chat. If you go to the next slide, you had people in the chat that said, so I asked my friend, I said, hey, Harrison, can you do me a favor and record one of your live streams so that I can use it to present for the Secret Society? And he said, yep, of course. And so he said to his viewers while he was playing, he said, oh, I'm recording for a conference, and so he's a big World of Warcraft player, which is a Activision Blizzard game, and Khasra is from Activision Blizzard, and I mentioned to him, oh yeah, there's going to be a Activision Blizzard guy there, and he's presenting and everything. And so when my friend Harrison told his viewers that there was going to be a Blizzard person on the panel, somebody wrote in chat, you said that you're going to have Blizzard execs watching, so at Blizzard, a little waving emoji, right? It's a little animated thing in the chat. And then as he continued to talk about the conference and say to people, oh, say hi to the conference, people in the chat wrote hi, at conference, hi, and someone else said, hello, normies, calling everybody who doesn't know things about games that they're normies, right? We're all just dirty normies here. And some people even said hi to Mitch. So that's one example of interaction that's happening while someone is gaming, and that's specific to Twitch broadcasting, which feeds itself into esports. And if you go to the next slide, but don't play the video yet, please, we have the other thing that's important about Twitch is that Ninja is making $500,000 a month, and Harrison makes his income from people who donate to their content, right? And so a lot of times when people give donations or give subscriptions, they pay a certain amount of money a month to support their favorite content creators. And watching anybody on Twitch is 100% free. But when you give to support your favorite creators. They sometimes cater to you, they talk to you, things like that. And so it's a way to engage with the personality and have the personality engage back with you. So in this video in a second, when we play it, you'll see, hopefully that doesn't lag too much, you'll see that somebody actually donates to my friend's channel, and you'll see a dancing shark in the middle of the screen. Go ahead and play the video.
Want that? Mitigates, my man, dude, with the 5 gift tier sub.
Great. So as you can see there, right, we got a little dancing shark action, and somebody under the profile name of Mitigates, right, who watches my friend Harrison play, donated to Harrison 5 free subscriptions for random people that were also watching. So now Harrison is receiving 5 additional $5 per month subscriptions from fans, and one fan in particular who wanted to donate those and pay for them on behalf of the other viewers. And that supports Harrison's income, and it also gives interaction directly between the personality and the people watching. So if you go to my closing slide, right, this is all just to highlight, right, that there's viewership, which we're used to, where it's a passive experience, you're watching, you're not interacting with those that you're watching, and then finally viewingship, which is happening in esports, an active, interactive experience that is unique to the field and will certainly be of great importance now and continues to be for all sorts of opportunity in the space. So hopefully that gives you a quick snapshot of what it means to watch gaming, and that helps you see why something like this is so enthralling to so many and continues to be successful.
Zach, thank you very much. So we would have had a 4th speaker, which I mentioned, Colin, and since we stay to the hour format, we save some minutes for questions. I don't know if there's any questions, but now we have 16 minutes for questions if we prefer. So Rick or Patrick, are there any questions from any of the people that are listening into the webinar?
Yes, we did get one question that came in, and hopefully I sound better. I apologize for my earlier glitch. But first of all, thanks everybody. Thanks Kazra, Eli, and Zach, and you too, Mitch, for sharing these insights and data and kind of perspective on esports. There's so much happening. It's great to just be able to take a breath and get a kind of structured sense, insider's view of what's going on there. So the one question that came up so far, excuse me, I think it was during your presentation, Kazra, but maybe anybody that wants to have a comment. We're talking about the audience is growing so rapidly on these esports platforms, and particularly relative to, say, NFL audiences on linear TV. So the question is, I mean, we talked about the audience growth in esports and in these leagues. What is it, if you guys happen to know, what does the NFL viewership look like, an actual physical league versus these esports leagues?
I think, sorry, this is Kazra. I think if you look at traditional sports, and you look at their overall audience year over year, it's generally either flat or up or down 5%. And that's what gets reported publicly. And, you know, if you look at the ratings, that's what they say. What most people don't talk about in traditional sports is those age ranges. And if you actually look at the 18 to 34 age range for traditional sports, it's actually down year over year for every single sport except MLS. I think MLS was up 4% last year. But for example, NBA is down 20% in the 18 to 34 age range. And what's happening in traditional sports is they're not necessarily getting new viewers, or as many new viewers. Their current viewers are just becoming older. And the younger generation is not as interested in sports. They're still interested in competition, which is why esports is growing so fast, because they still want to see players compete in something at a very high level. But the content of sports is just not as relevant to them. And they're playing so much video games that esports is much more relevant.
I have a question related to that question before we ask Eli if he wants to jump in. This is for you, Zach. Simmons or the VAB turned out some report, and one of the things they addressed, or both of you might have addressed, was that people don't just watch esports and not watch traditional sports. Do you have any insight about that, Zach, and then anyone who wants to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that's unique about esports is that there are also many times games like Fortnite, which have become so mainstream that, you know, big names in hip hop are playing it, big celebrities are playing it, is that plenty of people who watch esports also watch traditional sports. And I'm looking for the numbers, but basically, you know, when you have a lot of people who play video games also watch them. And in traditional sports, you don't really have people who play traditional sports games and then watch them as well. You have a lot of people who are players and who are viewers, right? But the crossover is very high. So if anyone else wants to comment on this, I'm going to see if I can find that statistic that we have.
You can find it, but I want to reach out to Eli because he was with, theoretically, a traditional sports company, meaning Turner. Is there anything that you can share, given Turner's involvement in both, I think, football, basketball, and March Madness, and anything else that can give us more insight, Eli?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's such a tricky space to navigate because no two traditional sports, kind of like esports, there's no two traditional sports that are created equal. And you even look at kind of the college landscape and what's happening there. I mean, you know, I don't think anyone's really figured it. I do think that the pro sports that we know and think about, the NFL, the NBA, MLS, you know, I think they have a very unique opportunity to leverage, you know, games like Madden and FIFA and 2K, which they're doing to kind of drive that younger audience development. You know, I think it's still very early to understand, you know, how that works and if it's working. And, you know, I don't think we'll even know for years, but I think the traditional sports do have a very unique leverage point when it comes to that. And I think it will be the lifeblood of their growth as, you know, their current demographics are aging out and aging up, to backfill that viewership and even grow that viewership with a younger audience. I think they're going to need to lean heavily on esports competitively, but also, you know, amateur and grassroots. You know, you got to get people into the ecosystem first, whether they play competitively or not. I think that's another thing. But just to use traditional sports, esports, you know, the Maddens and FIFAs, as kind of a marketing vehicle, I think is a huge upside for them. I think if you look at
hold on for 1 second. But you were at Turner for a while, is that correct?
Correct. I was not at Turner when they launched E-League, so I wasn't really there for that. Or
okay.
What's the exact question?
Oh no, it just seems to me that Turner is so heavily involved in sports and traditional sports, and part of the value proposition of AT&T purchasing Warner. Maybe you understood some correlation as you're studying the field now between what Turner specifically might have done and how you see esports connecting, rather than generically how esports might be connecting into traditional sports. I didn't know if you had any insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, when I was there, esports wasn't really discussed. Now that I've been in the space for a little while, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, I think everyone's just trying to figure out. I don't think there's any, you know, I think there is a correlation between esports and, you know, viewership potential, but I honestly don't know, you know, where Turner's headed. I don't want to speak on behalf of Turner or anything, but, you know, I think it can be a good marketing vehicle to grow a younger audience, which, you know, as the space gets so fragmented, as we all talk about, you know, to be able to capture eyeballs and attention is vital, and to do it through gaming and esports is, you know, a very not easy way to do it, but a very kind of low-hanging fruit way to do it.
And Cosra, did you want to jump in with something as it relates to anything the other two guys brought up?
I think they covered everything really well.
And
Okay.
and I'll mention that I found the stats that we have. And basically about 82% of esports fans are also fans of the NFL, 72% of them of the NBA, and college football, and then college basketball at 70%, and so on and so forth, right? So you have a large overlap of audiences. And in fact, some, like I know certain football games have been broadcast on Twitch, for example. And you have, Twitch did NFL did a partnership with the creators of Fortnite to bring Fortnite jerseys into the game, right? So you have a sort of traditional sports fans overlap majorly with esports fans to, sponsorship and partnership opportunities, which is pretty exciting. So.
And Zach, what was your source for that information?
So that was a study that Simmons did back in spring of 2018 with esports and sports. And so one of the things that is definitely true about the space, and Kosra and I have talked about this a number of times, but data in esports is rare, and good data is even rarer because it's difficult to capture this younger demographic. But where we have caught it, we've seen that there is a lot of overlap, given that it's a young audience who is also passionate, about traditional sports.
So there's 3 sources out there, most recently in publications. There's eMarketer's Esports 2019, which is called eMarketer's Forecast for U.S. Audience, U.S. Ad Revenue Growth, for people who are interested. The Video Ad Bureau, the VAB, published a report a month ago that talks about the field. Simmons, now MRI Simmons, published a report about data, and the EAB, the Esports Ad Bureau, and their members have turned out papers and talked about the growing relevance of esports, younger generation, in the future. And recently there was a esports kind of upfront, which Synopsys had put together. So those are sources that you can get more information, or organizations that are following this area. Rick, are there any other questions?
We do. We have several more questions. There's a few questions generally in the category of if you're a media company and you want to get access to some of this content, how does that work, the licensing? Is it the individual players, the leagues, or so we've got a number of people from local media participating in the webinar. How do they get access to some of the content and get into this segment?
Eli?
Yeah, you basically just have to go to whoever holds the IP, right? Whether that's the game publisher or the league operator. ESL has a media rights division where we go out and do deals with distribution partners for our events. So ESL One New York, Intel Extreme Masters. So from a distribution standpoint, it's primarily exclusive, as you all know. It's primarily digital. So we're working with, virtually every platform that's agnostic to esports to distribute our content. So whoever has the rights, I guess, is the short answer.
And Kosra?
Yeah, I think that was it. Just like any traditional, I would say, sports company, we have media rights divisions, and they sell rights to different companies around the world. The one thing I do want to call out there is a lot of the times there is an exclusive digital right holder, and that is usually someone like a Twitch or Facebook or YouTube. And then there's sometimes there's an exclusive linear rights holder in the U.S. By country. So in the U.S., for example, for Watch League, it's Disney and ABC and ESPN. And then from there, I think each country around the world can get carved out.
All right. Rick, next question.
So another question, again, goes back to the local media perspective. And I think we touched on this in the last answer. There's digital rights and linear rights. Are there best practices for the linear side, and how might that open up in terms of opportunities versus the digital side?
When you say best practices, is that how do you get to Carnegie Hall? You take a subway?
It's a growth market. Are there some business lessons or negotiating lessons or ways to represent an interactive experience over, essentially a linear platform for getting audiences and sponsorship and advertising support?
Yeah, I can jump in here just because I've worked with our linear partners at Disney, ESPN, and ABC, and kind of worked on the strategy on how to roll out esports on those channels. But I think there's a few important things. One of them is understanding what your main goal is. At the end of the day, if you're putting esports on a linear channel, I don't think your main goal is ever going to be to increase overall viewership. Just because the nature of linear is most people are of an older age age group, so they're not usually going to stick around. But if the goal is to increase your engagement with the 12 to 17 or 18 to 34 or younger age group, then I think esports does a great job of that. To give you an example, 4 weeks ago, we had Overwatch League stage finals on ABC afternoon on a Sunday for 2 hours. And that's actually when the Mueller report cut in into that. And one thing we saw was when Overwatch League was on, the 18 to 34 audience was actually very steady and they were actually very engaged. And as soon as it cut to the Mueller report, about 40K of those that audience immediately left, and then they slowly came back once the Mueller report cut out, and we were back to Overwatch League. And it really shows that this content engages that younger audience much more. Now, the overall ABC viewership may have been lower than usual, but if ABC's goal is not necessarily to increase viewership, but to get that younger audience to watch ABC more, knowing that that can be the future of the network, in that sense, esports does a great job, and they're very happy with that, how that performs.
That's a great example. We might have time for another question or two. One question is just sort of a straightforward question. Several different sources of revenue and monetization possibilities. But when it comes to the advertising side of it, how does that work? Who sells the ads and where do they appear in this whole esports experience?
I can take that one. This is Eli. You know, I think it depends on the event, on the product. I mean, Kazra can speak to Overwatch and Activision Blizzard, but you know, our event or in our events, we have the ability to embed our partner commercial messages in stream. We also have other branding placements like logo placements and things like that, lower thirds. But from a traditional advertising standpoint, we actually burn in our commercial messaging. So we have kind of like traditional TV ad breaks, but obviously they're on digital platforms. And so that's primarily where our commercial inventory sits. But then the platform themselves, for Twitch, Facebook, whatever, they're able to monetize around it. So Twitch can, you know, sell pre-roll, which is ad served against our content. But our stream is kind of a burned stream, where the ads are not served. They're laid in beforehand and served that way.
Kazra,
That's great.
do you want to comment?
I think you totally covered it. I would say just there are two different categories. There is the media you can buy, which is an ad, and you can either buy it usually, you know, from like an ESL, and they would put it in the broadcast, or you can buy it on Twitch and it can be ad served. But then outside of that, you have the sponsorship, and the sponsorship is that association with the content. And it's harder to measure that because you're not necessarily, you know, serving an ad and seeing impressions, but you can, if you measure the change in perception of an audience towards a brand, you can actually see that sponsorship on esports is very powerful, and it does have a very large effect. For Overwatch League, most of our revenue has come from sponsorships and brands wanting to associate their brand with the Overwatch League brand, with the audience.
So, Kazra, Eli, thanks for stepping in at the last moment. Zach, thank you. Colin, we hope everything. What?
One last thing. Yes, one last thing. So I wanted to ask for the education of the attendees, just really quick to Kazra and Eli. How should people spell esports?
Excellent.
All lowercase, one word.
All lowercase, one word, all lowercase, and treat it like a proper noun. Capitalize the E if it's at the beginning of the sentence.
Yep, that's how we do it too.
All right, there we go. So just so everyone knows, if you go out and talk about it, don't reveal yourself as a person who might not know by capitalizing the S.
Now
treat
you're
it like email. Yes,
Yep.
Treat it the same way you treat email. Sorry, there you go. Sorry about that.
Well, that's fine. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Kazra, Eli, Colin. We hope everything's going well. And if Rick, you want to say goodbye to everyone, please say whatever you wish to say. And thank you, everyone, for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you being with us. And thank you also for the spelling lesson. We always try to add unique value in our webinars, and there you have a new one. So we'll wrap it for today. Thank you for being with us. Before you leave the webinar session, we have a couple of quick survey questions. We'd really appreciate it if you'd give us some feedback on those. Really is helpful for us for these sessions. But otherwise, thank you again to everybody, speakers and audience members. Really informative session. We'll call it adjourned. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.